Good afternoon, folks, on this lovely Saturday. On popular demand, there are two topics that everybody's asking me to comment on. One is the MSP slash farmers Andolan, and the other is the Supreme Court judgment on making the electoral bonds illegal. Well, earlier I would always circumvent domestic politics because I promised somebody not to kind of use them. But both of these actually somehow tie in with foreign policy and foreign politics and foreign economic policy. Let's start the case with agriculture, MSP, the Andolan. Let's start with MSP. How people have been screaming about MSP, it's unfair and it's going to trash our budget, etc., etc. Do remember that. So I'll start with what this lady says. Farmers Against Farming. This is Neeraj Kaushal. She's a professor of social policy in Columbia University, so she should know what she's saying. But I would say from the US perspective, she says farmers unions are asking for the moon. Their demands are excessive. Are they? I'll ask Neeraj Kaushal, does she know what happened during Reaganomics? Does she know what happened during the period of Clinton? How farms were corporatized? How small farmers all bit the bullet and died? Does she know that between the United States, when you compare the United States, and that's what she's doing, and Europe, that they are heavily subsidized agriculture. And India's subsidies in the form of MSP and used to be in the form of seeds, but the seeds are now at global prices. Electricity is at global prices. Diesel, that's the other big input, is more than global prices, right? More than global prices. And fertilizers, yes, there's some subsidy there, but not to the extent that the United States and Europe does, right? But still, think about this. There is 11 countries on farmer strikes, including biggies like Germany and you got it, France. Both of this. Now, what's the difference between then the United States, where you're seeing no strikes, and what's happening in Europe? Europe, first thing, they pulled down the subsidy. And hey, what happened? Agriculture went up in arms, right? The United States, because it's corporatized, right? Big corporations, big farms, heavily subsidized. They eat the cream, right? They just hang out and hang back and eat the cream. They make global policy, folks. So you really can't push down what's happening on the United States and India. I believe some of the Indian policies that have come out, whether it is with a GST or is by kind of being written by some sell-by date Indian American from the Reagan era. So, and he's making the classical errors, because the difference is that India and the United States and Europe, India has extremely small farms, India has extremely small land holdings, and we start at a very low level of per capita income. So when she says this, to say the least, for far from making agriculture financially viable, as the agitating farmer leaders have claimed, these demands, if accepted, will actually ruin the agricultural economics of Punjab, Haryana, and UP, three states whose farmers are leading the protest. Will they? Is my next question. Will they? These prices are not increasing. Now, let me just tell you about this MSP. Right? People are talking about in India, everybody who's jumping up and down, 11,000 crores hit on the budget. But is it good actually 11,000 crores? Let me tell you the reality. You know, you have a basket. First, not every agricultural product has MSP. Then, in the key products that it has MSP, the way it goes is, if you take this pie, right? 1/3 of it is consumed because of such small land holdings at home. So there's no hit of MSP, no hit of MSP guarantee. Then 1/3 is anyway legally bought by the FCI to be distributed in fair price shops. That's already there in the budget. So hey, nothing there either. So it's that 1/3. That's what the farmers are fighting about. And that, folks, is for the private sector. And that's why there's resistance from this government, and the farmers are insisting on it. Because in that 1/3 lies whatever profit the farmers can make, right? And why shouldn't they make profit, right? Right. My estimate is, and if on the back of envelope, that the hit to our budget for that 1/3 and for the number of products that are under MSP, it's going to be no more than 56,000 crore, way less than the amount of loans that are going into NPA from our and have been written off, right? Way less. Okay. Now the other point is that we've talked about the United States, we talked about Europe. Europe and India have something in common, are non-corporatized farms, hence andolans going on in both areas, like in Italy, in France, in Germany, and in India. Then you have, but the difference between the two is you're not seeing this kind of aggravation that's happening on our borders, I mean, I can't even tell you. But here's a picture somewhere I have, right? Somewhere I have a picture of the farmers and what they are having to go through. The number of tear gas shells that have been used on the border, especially the border at the Ambala area, is unbearable. And if even drones have been used to drop these things, that's, and you have a situation where you have Manohar Lal Khattar, who's the Chief Minister of Haryana, saying, hey, this is like India and Pakistan. But who's made this India and Pakistan? By putting up the barricades, where now Punjab is saying they're they're in their territory. It was first made India and Pakistan by the Haryana government, not by the Kisans coming in from Punjab, because they have every right to go to Delhi. Every right. It is a citizen's right to use the road. You cannot blockade roads. So what we have is government to bring down FCI borrowings. And let me just tell you this thing about FCI borrowings. Our deficit was shown was somewhat always finagled because a lot of it was an FCI borrowing, right? So now it's time to bring down the FCI borrowing, and that's why you have the situation with what we have. Farmers stirred, BJP not shaken. Let me just tell you, farm stir likely to expand as SKM decides to join protest. Haryana-Punjab border remains battleground. Farmers, cops clash. This is the picture I was talking about. This doesn't look like a border of two Indian states, just like the two Indian states that were in trouble in Manipur, Assam, Meghalaya. This is again Punjab, Haryana, right? Tale of two borders, farmers not in sight, inconvenience to public, common threat. So now, inconvenience to public is in Delhi, for example. But the farmers are still 200 kilometers away. But the story that's spinning around in what you see in mainline media is only about how farmers are destroying the life in Delhi. Yes, that's not it, folks. That's just not it, right? Band and curbs set to slow you down today. And farmers stirred, BJP not shaken. I would say with what I'm seeing right now, with the way Charan Singh has been off the rack, given Bharat Ratna and so on and so forth. Everybody seems to be getting Bharat Ratna for some reason or the other. Is that it is shaken and it is stirred. It is shaken and it's stirred. But the problem is we are not getting it because, as Suhas Palishkar writes, that's the new ecosystem, right? We may be on the verge of redefinition of democracy without dissent or differences, and that's what we are talking about, right? And the other stuff, like I said, 2 killed in Manipur, internet suspended, mob outrage triggers fresh Manipur violence toll hits 2. Now, Manipur, so this is a democracy which has andolans going on everywhere, almost a civil war in Manipur, right? And this is all affecting our foreign policy. Now look at China and what happened to agriculture. If we generally do what they're trying to do with this policy that was written, I think, right around the Reagan time, right? By urbanizing, right? China, for example, take an example. It is importing almost 60% of food grains that it needs. Why? Because it's degraded all its land. It's moved all its land into the fertile land into factories and degraded the rest. And it's moved most of its agricultural labor into factories. Hence, hey, it's having problem in agriculture. Is that the way we want to go? Is that the way we are going, right? Because urbanization in India, you can see the state of agricultural farmers who moved into cities like Bombay and Delhi and Chennai. They are not very well off, folks. They are not very well off. And we actually have a sense of urban decay, right? Now, what we really should be worried. So this is, like I said, we are talking about how this ties in, because what is happening with the MSP has got to do with the WTO corporatization. So there's got international impact, and it's beginning to play out. What's happening with the farmers is beginning to play out, at least in BBC and Canadian broadcasts and the Australian broadcasts, maybe not in the United States yet. But what we should be focused on, it should be headlines, is this: China moves its nationals into its vacant defense village along LAC. But this is the only country, like I said, supremacy is critical in this. And the United States is not going to be knocked off that that purge, folks. I mean, anybody it's really funny. We need the United States, but we have more people, American doubters or haters in most of us, all of our countries than anywhere else, right? India-US toys beyond expediencies, as Sujan Chenoy writes, true. As 2024 unfolds, the US and China appear to be dialing down on tensions. Despite these developments, the Chinese challenges to the US is structural and long-term in nature. The US has awakened to the perils of over-dependence on China. The China economic juggernaut has provided cheap goods to the US consumer to maintain the American lifestyle in short run, but has hurt the US economy in the long run by hollowing out several sectors of the US economy. And India definitely can't go down that path. A confident India is less likely to countenance Chinese unilateralism as witnessed in recent years. Strengthened military capabilities and a rapidly rising economy complement a deeper strategic convergence between India and the United States. The US has a lot riding on the future of its economic and strategic partnerships in Indo-Pacific region. As part of its risk mitigation strategy and the compulsions of friendshoring, the US will be inclined to further its trade and investment ties and technological cooperation with reliable partners such as India. Bilateral ties between India and the US have stand-alone and enduring logic of their own. The US bet on India as part of a long-term vision beyond fleeting expediency, and that is true. And that's why, folks, electronics exports grow at record 22% in April and December. Guess what? Who? iPhone, largest contributor in electronics and mobile exports. iPhone, American. But in order for us to be able to absorb this, you have to do what's been asked here, as Rezul Laskar writes. US envoy seeks change in India's export FDI policies and in defense of everything, as written by Seema Siroy. A very important article, an important point. On point and on track, the India-US defense partnership is going places and recording successes. The US is making new offers, India is listening, and the two bureaucracies are working to align their needs while making startups a part of the process. The energy to do what one was unthinkable obviously comes from a common thread called China. Best to think of the US willingness to sell, transfer technology, and otherwise enhance India's defense posture in terms of two concepts: deterrence and interoperability. The more effectively India can deter Chinese coercion along the border and across the Indian Ocean and beyond, the better for all concerned. And if India's defense acquisitions, MQ-9B drones, for example, can augment effort for Quad partners, even better. Then you have this. Jaishankar Blinken talk on progress in US strategic ties. US NSA set to visit India this month. EAM, unlike Canada, US doesn't justify separatism, but that Pannu affair has not gone away, because look at the kind of heavy lifting that had to be done. US beats token resistance over Pannu issue, approves sale of drones to India. Backed drone deal after painstaking talks with administration, says Senator Cardin. And then you have this, the India-US defense tango. The drone deal shows that strategic ties are on track, with the ICET taking them to new heights. Cardin said he had sought a clear assurance from the administration that Indian government would thoroughly investigate the allegations implicating an Indian official in an assassination plot of a US citizen on American soil. This is a reminder that while both governments have found a mechanism to deal with the allegations, the US has sought accountability. India has set up an investigation committee. The issue will remain an irritant. Just do remember that. It's not gone away. Says both governments must, however, protect the wider strategic relationship. And then you need to know this. We don't have any American expertise. We have so many expats there. But unfortunately, our defense experts in India, in my view, more or less clueless. Build expertise on America and India, as right Prashant Jha. The development, the US and the depth of Delhi-DC ties demand greater scholarship of history, institutions, actors, motivations, and society. Both governments and academia need to invest more. As the Indian state turns towards the West strategically, as Indian society's connection with America's society deepen given the diaspora, and as the US witnesses a dramatic internal political churn with major external ramifications, India must invest in understanding the US better. But this irritation will continue. India raises with US ambassador visit to POK. India and Quad's driver's seat. US sitting next with corrective steering wheel, says Gassetti. US had asked Manmohan to not encourage Japan on Quad X forensics. So this is what it is. Manmohan Singh wanted to do it, but hey, The US that time was not that anxious. US House passes Quad bill to intensify cooperation. And another reason what's happened here is the way the Americans pulled back on their sanctions on Venezuela. And look what, as sanctions ease, India becomes top buyer of Venezuelan crude in December. Jan, this is another place where the United States played its role. Qatar releases 8 Navy veterans awarded death, 7 returned to India. But what the IMF Gopinath says, this is something that you must all hear. Says, speaking on FP Live on Monday, Gopinath remarked that one of the reasons the IMF upgraded global growth for 2023 was because of the United States' strong performance, not anybody else. Overall, this is an economy that is doing well, consumption is strong, the market is slowing, but still in a very orderly manner, and it remains tight. If you look at indicators like unemployment rates, wage growth, this is a healthy economy. These are the two factors that Indian data statistics don't show. And then dollar stronger than we think. A lot of people want to have the dollar fall off. I pray why? I don't know, right? What's the other currency we're going to go with? As Saurabh Jha writes, he says, however, this is still a drop in the ocean. According to the International Monetary Fund, end of June 22, the RMB accounted for a mere 2.88 of allocated global central bank reserves, as opposed to the dollar leading the pack at 58.88. Let's grow up, folks, okay? And stop being delusional. In any case, the petro RMB is not as attractive as it sounds. The Chinese economy is not seen as being particularly stable anymore. Okay, while much is made of the US debt load, China's overall debt as a percentage of GDP is higher, with a large part of it linked to a real estate sector. More than a quarter of Chinese GDP that is going over the precipice. Okay, don't think about the Chinese anymore. Okay, foreign investors typically don't increase exposure to a currency that is not freely convertible on the capital account. So both India and China. Okay. The US may be in decline, but it is not in relative decline with respect to either China or Europe. And that is the fundamental reason why dollar supremacy will endure versus anybody else. And just remember that when you follow up on that, you have this. Germany overtakes Japan as third biggest economy. But look at their GDP. 4.2 trillion and 4.5, making it a total of 8.7. Get what the US GDP is. $25 billion. UK and Japan slip into recession. Okay, the dollar getting dethroned, not quite as Monica Hullen writes. She says, de-dollarization predicts the fall of the hegemony of the US, but no alternative currency exists. To be a key player in the global reserve currency pecking order, India must ensure a bigger heft in manufacturing, services, production, and export. The creation of the Russian and Chinese SWIFT alternatives to global currency transactions, along with increasing number of bilateral deals of trade in non-dollar currencies such as the yuan, are chipping away at the supremacy, but not fast enough. To the classic twin deficit problem in the US of a large current account deficit that also is not hurting. These three reasons are the necessary conditions for dethroning the dollar, but are not sufficient because of TINA factor. There is the three contenders for the crown have been found unworthy of it. Gold, despite the global certain bank rush to hoard in the last few months, will never become a currency peg again. Bitcoin will not replace the dollar because of the taint of terror, drug and money laundering episodes over the past few years. To hand over the global currency keys to an open source digital code is not going to happen at an institutional level. The yuan can make a dent as a global currency of transaction, but cannot take over the store value of function. If the US has militarized the dollar a few times, there is no limit to what China will do if it becomes a store of global savings flow. Dethroning the US will mean finding a country and a currency where institutions that support free markets growth and pursuit of profit without rampant political interference are robust. Power cannot flow to a country that reduces its most powerful tech giant, whose CEO has run in with the Chinese government over this critique of regulation, into a Japanese university professor, folks. So there you go. Don't bet against the dollar. Don't bet against the United States. 3 cheer, Jai Hind and Satyamev Jayate.